Now, I think it's pretty safe to say that the future of the Star Wars franchise seems to be quite expansive, not just with their books, novels, comics, and video games, but also, let's not forget about their new Star Wars TV shows, their new Star Wars trilogy in the works, as well as other spin-off films by Bob Iger, Bob Chapek, you name it, and exactly what they have to offer in the next couple of years, in comparison to what many would call the Kathleen Kennedy era. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, one thing about Disney Star Wars is that we do know that they are now in a phase of desperation and damage control to really get the ball rolling again when it comes to this massive franchise. Essentially, what they really are trying to do is that they're really trying to build it from the ground up and really make it just as successful as the Marvel Cinematic Universe and as expansive as the MCU. We see what's happening with the MCU now, right? All these crazy things with the new Doctor Strange movie and how it's going to tie into a supposed Spider-Verse, and how they're really kind of paying more attention to what the Marvel fans want to see, and how Disney's also going to do this with the Star Wars fans. And we are already getting this with The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1. We saw a great big surprise at the very end of that first episode. We got the next episode coming up in just a short while. Now, everything what's happening behind the scenes over at Lucasfilm, a lot of change is being made, all because of Bob Chapek. We all gotta thank Bob Chapek, because at the end of the day, he is the very man who is changing Star Wars as we know it. He is the guy that is creating his own legacy of Star Wars and is really giving a lot of attention toward George Lucas, Jon Favreau, and Dave Filoni to team up and deliver as much authentic Star Wars material as possible. Now, with that being said, of course, what's really intriguing is that now that the Skywalker saga is over, both Disney and Lucasfilm are now focused on their new Star Wars trilogy of movies as well as their new Star Wars universe in order to deliver a new mythology to Star Wars fans around the world. Now, it's explained that currently, as of right now, many changes are indeed being made behind the scenes over at Lucasfilm in order to regulate the Star Wars franchise in order to make it successful. However, it's described that actress Brie Larson is described that at one point in time, when Brie Larson was being interviewed about specific franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, and others, Brie Larson went on to say that when it comes to Star Wars, as an example, she felt that George Lucas never really knew what cinema was all about, and that George Lucas with the originals and the prequels lacked some form of creativity that could have been far superior. Let me stop right there for a second. So in Brie Larson's eyes, the originals, let alone the prequels, lacked creativity in the eyes of George Lucas. Now, to me, you really can't say anything about the originals. I think that the originals are gold. It really was lightning in a bottle. George Lucas did an amazing job, you know, with the script and directing and handling it and just making great characters enter into this, you know, Star Wars franchise at the time back in 1977. Brie Larson, I feel, has no place in this world to criticize the original trilogy when she's already criticizing, you know, other franchises out there separate from Star Wars as we speak. So moving on from that, alright, Brie Larson additionally, alright, and this comes at no surprise really, Brie Larson actually continues to state that the same thing with Game of Thrones, alright, she compares George Lucas to David Benioff and D.B. Weiss when it comes to the prequel trilogy movies. Now, that to me, I feel, is in no way the same thing. A lot of fans, yes, were very upset with the very ending of Game of Thrones. You guys may recall, it wasn't all that long ago, where Game of Thrones had a similar Last Jedi situation where there was a lot of backlash, a lot of fans were very angry about what happened with Game of Thrones, and Brie Larson is comparing the prequels to how Game of Thrones ended, and how George Lucas handled it in that sense. I feel that's almost like comparing George Lucas's writing to David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and how they handled the last batch of episodes of Game of Thrones. Now, some of you guys out there might like the very ending of Game of Thrones. I know a lot of people out there had mixed feelings on it, but most people actually disliked exactly how that series ended on HBO. Now, moving on from this, alright, she additionally goes on to state and goes back on the subject of Star Wars to where she explains that Lucas was actually very uncreative with the prequel trilogy movies, and that she was never a fan of them, let alone some of his actual styles within the original trilogy. Brie Larson goes on to unveil that George Lucas handled both the Skywalkers in a very poor way, and that she believes that George Lucas was actually afraid of Star Wars fans for not coming back to do the sequel trilogy, and that she can understand as to why. Now, the real reason as to why George Lucas did not really want to come back to do a sequel trilogy is that, yes, he was very reluctant because of what happened with the prequels. I wouldn't say that he was necessarily afraid of Star Wars fans, but I think that he was more so realizing that he was getting up there in age. He wanted to focus more on his own thing, his own life. He even said this in interviews, that he wanted to live his life, do his own thing, maybe focus on other projects, if anything. And that, he didn't really know if he was going to be around, all this time. He's still here, but he didn't really know. He was questioning, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and he just wanted to focus on his own life, and I can understand that. He is up there in age. So for Brie Larson to say that he was afraid of Star Wars fans, just flat out, that was the only reason, that obviously wasn't the only reason as to why he did not come back to the sequel trilogy. I understand that some fans out there are frustrated over George Lucas for just selling out and handing everything over to Disney and handing everything over to Kathleen Kennedy and just calling it a day. But at the same exact time, can we really blame George Lucas? I mean, he went through a lot of trouble with the prequel trilogy, a lot of fan backlash against The Phantom Menace, let alone Attack of the Clones, and then he had a nice rebound with Revenge of the Sith. He actually did very well with that movie. A lot of fans love that movie. And so I think it wasn't necessarily a complete failure when it came to the prequels. It did actually have its, ups and downs, let alone some of the worst dialogue that you could see in Star Wars movies, I will agree. But Brie Larson, has no place to really criticize George Lucas, especially when it comes to the original trilogy of movies. So, beyond all of that, alright, Brie Larson went on to unveil that George Lucas, of course, was very similar to David Benioff and D.B. Weiss in how they handle Game of Thrones, like I say, and that she compares the ending of the Game of Thrones with the prequel trilogy movies of Star Wars films. When questioned about her stance on George Lucas once again, Brie went on to unveil that he never really even created the whole idea of the original trilogy, and that it was not all his creation of the Skywalker saga, and that he had help. I don't know what that really means, but eventually Brie Larson was questioned about Kathleen Kennedy and how she is handling Star Wars, and that Brie Larson believes that it was right of Kathleen Kennedy to exclude and get rid of George Lucas from the sequel trilogy. Larson believes that if Lucas was a big part of the sequels, it just would have been a mess like what happened with the prequel trilogy. I don't believe that that is necessarily true. Look at what we have been hearing about the sequel trilogy and what J.J. Abrams was doing with George. It was amazing. It was incredible. And Kathleen Kennedy just threw him under the bus. I don't know why. They would have made so much more money if they left George Lucas's scenes in Episode 9 without a doubt. That's pretty much a given. Now, additionally, Brie Larson unveils that she even auditioned for the sequel trilogy at one point in time and did not get a role for a side character that was in the talks for The Last Jedi back in 2017. Brie Larson is currently getting ready for the Leslie Headland Star Wars TV series and Captain Marvel 2, where Larson unveils that Captain Marvel will be a great outlet for promoting activism and real-world issues that are happening as we speak. It's described also that Brie Larson explained that she believes that Star Wars was better without George Lucas's input into the sequel trilogy, and that if he was actually involved, it would have been a disaster in the making for the Star Wars fandom. Brie Larson also makes it clear that she actually loved what Rian Johnson had done with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and that she respects Rian Johnson's work on The Last Jedi and what he stood for in the universe. So, once again, I think that alone tells you a lot, right? So, I think that the fact that Brie Larson has these beliefs about George Lucas, I think it's just all out of place. She's not really correct on a lot of different stances on this. I believe that George is a very talented guy. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't be standing here with Star Wars at all. So, like I've said before in the past, guys, I think that obviously There are a lot of people out there that love Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, you're not going to change that, and that's fine, but I just think that she did a horrible job. So with that being said, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.